Hi guys, how are you? So nice to connect to you. So welcome to this video. Welcome to this channel. My name is Laura and this is Pleiadian Healer. If you're new, definitely subscribe, hit the notification bell. A lot of new and exciting stuff happening and coming up. All right, so I have my notebook here. These are some fresh insights I received. A lot of insight came through, and I think we'll have material for the next few videos for sure. Not really sure where exactly to start, but I think we can definitely start with the current situation we are in over the past 2 years already. What is really going on, or rather, what exactly are they distracting us from? And I'm going to share a screen with you too. Now, I kind of just want to point out that, I do have a few ads as well, just like random ads that came through as well. If you guys go back to about a year ago, I was analyzing a few ads that kept popping up, how Google's trying to take over the world and how they target us with these ads. And through these advertisements, we're basically giving consent and everything. And so another thing that also came through very, very clearly right now, and I think it's something that we noticed 2 years ago. At least I remember, I definitely noticed this, especially in Italy, China too, even though I don't know much about the Chinese traditions and history, but especially in those like older European countries, that it was all about, what was it really about? It was all about isolating the people, right? Like 2 years ago, when this entire sham happened, the pandemic or whatever. Now, if you guys go back, and especially the ones who maybe have relatives in Italy or you knew people who were there during that time, do you guys remember, and I know I took screenshots of this somewhere too, but I want to share like a different screen with you. But do you guys remember these older people that were basically isolated to such a degree where some of them even passed away earlier, because especially in cultures like that, it's very important for them to socialize. And so recently what really came through very strongly is that it's happening all over the world. I mean, not just like in that country, but if you focus on Italy specifically, Italy's really where it all kind of started, aside from China, right? And so Italy had like one of the worst lockdowns. And I do think, a lot of people obviously suffered there and everything, but I do think it was all about the older people there too. But we actually have to go all the way back to China again. I don't know anyone in Wuhan right now. It's so strange. I went to Malaysia in 2017 and I befriended this Chinese girl over there. We were like backpacking. We met like at a random event or whatever. And I did not even find out she was from Wuhan. Or maybe I didn't even care she was from Wuhan until I actually checked out her Facebook profile the other day again. She's not on there frequently because obviously everything's censored in China, but she actually lives in the US right now. So she kind of like got over from China to the US through school. I'm not sure if it was med school or something like that. And I did not even notice that she was from Wuhan until maybe a few months ago, where, all of a sudden she liked one of my pictures for the first time in like 5 years or whatever. And I was like, oh, I haven't heard from her in a long time. I check her out. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're from Wuhan. My goodness. So that's the only person I kind of know in person from actual Wuhan, but she's not there right now. Now, I did come across this one profile of a woman living in Shanghai right now, and I want to share my screen with you guys. So bear with me here because she's actually giving a firsthand report of what's really going on. Okay. So this is Dominica Drazal on Instagram. And she is originally, I think she's from France, but it seems like she's lived kind of all over. She has a family, I'm assuming she's in her 50s or something. So they lived in Dubai, Paris, New York City, China, Africa, whatever. And for some reason, she liked China a lot. I personally have never been. I don't really know. I know friends who lived in Shanghai for like, my one friend lived there for like 7 years or whatever. She thought it was much better than Korea, especially for African-American Black people, because they're really racist in Korea, supposedly, according to her. And in China, it was actually a nice quality of life that she had. But overall, she just kind of was over the entire Chinese living there as an American expat. And so she kind of just moved somewhere else after that, but she was there for a while. But this woman here, she's white, she's French, I think she has a family. She supposedly liked China so much that she lived there and then they moved somewhere else for whatever reason. And then she actually made an effort to move back here during the pandemic. So I think July 2021. And so she's giving a firsthand report. Okay, you see her right here. This is the 32nd day of a 4-day lockdown. That was like 7 days ago. We are released from our apartments for 5 minutes in order to perform our oh so sexy squat for the daily test. It appears they're doing the mouth swab in this one. And she's saying, okay, a photo of the tests need to be shared in a group chat. If you don't, Nosy Nancy on the 12th floor will publicly flay and shame you. So it seems like the neighbors are snitching on each other. And then you see how these Chinese, and, this is just her posting on Instagram. And I do think this is true, by the way. I don't think this is like false information she's posting. So I do think she's really there. How they're basically, these are like official people who collect the people who don't adhere to it, right? Okay, so these are a few things that are going on in Shanghai. Now, the next few slides, let's just go back here. So she posts her dog and everything. So I guess this is what they look like. Watch to see the police smash into the apartment. The concept of fairness is a relative one and has graduated levels. A child crying at the unfairness of his ice cream dropping on the pavement feels the injustice of a situation as much as an adult might when crying about unfair treatment at work. So they are really, really targeting their own people here in Shanghai. They're forcing themselves into a private citizen home when no crime has been committed. The woman in this video tested positive, but refuses to go to the quarantine camps. I already have a different video out there on the quarantine camps, and that's from roughly a month ago or like 3 weeks ago. So definitely watch that after this video if you haven't yet. Now this is all her footage, by the way, okay? Or rather what she kind of is posting. But they're literally dragging these people out, and I'll post her Instagram link below in the description box and also the pinned comment, so you can definitely check that out after, okay? Just so we can kind of like get on with this video. So she has a dog and she has a child and she has a husband. So at least they have their own emotional support. They're obviously foreigners in Shanghai. And she's actually already said that people came up to her, were like, well, if you don't like it here, just go back to where you came from. You know, kind of like that type of attitude, which I think is always so silly, to be honest with you, because I'm an expat myself in this country. And I'm highly allergic to those kind of statements because I'm like, well, you came here for a reason, right? And I'm paying taxes and I'm in the system. So no, excuse me, I'm not going where I came from. But basically, she's saying in this one, which I found so interesting, the local press would like people to believe that the city is flourishing and that over 50% has been opened. She's debunking this and saying nonsense. And here you see it, an elderly woman is praying to a god, not realizing that this isn't a Buddhist temple. So they're, so basically she's so old that she doesn't even know what's really going on. And they're so confused. They're confusing everyone, right? They're confusing the children at this point. They're tearing the families apart to get into these quarantine camps. And they're really confusing the older people who would need this emotional support from their own relatives, which they can't see, even if their test is negative or whatever, right? So they're really tearing all the cultural stuff here apart, all the traditions apart. And she's putting like a few other things here. So the latest one, I think, was from 14 hours ago. So it's basically like, each time her dog barks, she's wondering whether or not authorities are approaching their apartment door. So this is how bad it is. This kind of reminds you of like World War II in Germany almost, right? Where you have to be scared to be taken away into these camps. 2 people in a room is what they're saying. So she's saying, we haven't tested positive for the disease, so why is she afraid? The new rule is if one person in your building tests positive, then the whole building can be taken to the camp. It's crazy. And then they're saying it's not about what you want. Here it's China. Okay, we're not in the US. So that's basically what the police is saying, the Chinese police, which are dressed like this. Okay. So you can check out her Instagram and every single thing that she's posted. And, you know, I asked her actually, because I'm following her on Instagram from one of my accounts. I was like, why don't you just go back to France? Like, it seems like it's so bad. And she's like, I think she has her tickets set for June or whatever. So yeah, I do believe she is planning on going back, but it's not that easy to fly out right away, especially from China. I think you need like a visa to get out or something. Like, I actually don't know what it is at this point. And she says it wasn't that bad. You know, she said it was in July, it wasn't that bad last year. Like, everything was okay after that first initial wave, but now it's gotten horrible again. And so what really, really struck me though, in one of her videos, which I can't find right now, but you can go through it, in one of her videos, it was all about getting these older people into the quarantine camps. And so what are you doing when you're doing that? You know how much stress it is as a person my age. I'm young, you know, I can handle like solo travel. I can be alone for an extended amount of time. Like, I've done it my entire life. You know how stressful it is for me to having to go to something like that? Just imagine an older person in their 80s, like 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, who needs emotional support from their kids or their grandkids, who maybe can't even use the bathroom on their own because they're so old. You know, just imagine that in a quarantine camp. What do you think the survival rate would be? They might have strokes, they might have heart attacks. Emotionally, they're going to be crippled from this entire 2-year ordeal. The older generation is going to die off, right? And it's going to die off like that. So this is really what it's all about. The entire distraction, they've distracted us so long with, it's all about the mandates that are changing everything, right? They're changing the entire work dynamic. People who had jobs for like decades, all of a sudden either have to comply to these mandates, or if they don't want an injection inside of them, they have to quit their job. So the entire workforce is being restructured. We have this entire issue with everything being converted into robots, robotic AI, which that's already been pulled off for the past decades already, but now it's like full force. We have the entire DNA that's being modified with the injections, you know, them trying to convert us into AI with that, but also other things. We have so much going on, but the main point is, and this is really what came through so strongly in the latest insight that I received. I almost cried when it came through. Because it was so heartbreaking, because I myself, you know, I have grandparents still who are alive, like not all of them, obviously, but I have like a grandmother and a grandparent. So that's a lot for me, I think, for my age. They are actually right now, one of them is 90 and the other one is like almost 90. So they're pretty old. I know they're not going to be around forever. And they have so much to share, you know, like they were around during well, they were born in the 30s, so 30s, 40s, 50s, you know, they were around during all of when it really mattered. I felt, you know, when we still had like a quality type of life. Also, they can tell stories from their own parents and their own grandparents that is never going to be told in a history book. You know, like the stories that my grandmother told me about how people really were in the 1910s and 1930s or whatever. You will never find that in a history book. Like, it's all the way they're changing our history is erasing all of these generations. So this is an extreme example of how they are erasing our traditions and our entire history. And they've really targeted these 3 major focal countries. China, for one, which some people are like, I mean, I myself read on it. I was like, China's on a different timeline already. Okay. I don't know when they started being on a different timeline, whenever the regime kind of, you know, they had a proper regime, right? And then somehow it collapsed into communism. So whenever that happened, I don't know, I have to do research when exactly that happened in China, but still, all these older people have so much wisdom to share and so much tradition to provide, and they're really tearing it apart from China. Do you guys still remember when China used to be known as the dragon? Because today it came to me again, where I was like, oh my gosh, I remember the dragon symbol was a symbol for China somehow, and it had to do with some sort of ruler, emperor, whoever was it. I don't know, honestly, but do you guys still remember that? Because I started remembering that again, that the dragon was actually symbol for China. Sure, they have like Chinese New Year symbols and everything too. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about the Chinese dragon. Okay, moving on. And so that was the first country they're targeting. All right. The second country, and I'd almost forgotten about it, but not really, is India. So what's happening in China right now, okay, China, different timeline, whatever. Now they're getting to India. China and India are the largest world populations that you have right now. Whether or not their numbers are 100% true with the billions of people they have is irrelevant for this video. They do have a whole lot of people though. And so the vision that came through very clearly for me, you know, I already said in the previous video, like the interview I think I had with Sonia, I said it. I don't know if I actually ever really talked about it in the video, but I might do it in the video down the line. I have a lot of Indian friends. The reason I have a lot of Indian friends, some of them are directly from India. They came to America when they were teenagers or like in their early 20s or late teen, you know, like 19 years old or whatever as students. I have Indian friends who were born here, but their parents came from India. And then yet, you know, have like this wild mix of Indian friends here in New York City. I know it's not representative of the rest of the US. I know you don't have as many Indian people in the Midwest. You might not have as many Indian people in Florida, whatever, but you do have a lot of Indian people in California, on the East Coast, on the West Coast, I kind of feel. So the reason I personally have that many Indian friends, and the reason I know so much, like a little bit about that Indian culture at least, is simply because I used to hang out with a lot of Indian actors. I used to do a lot of, call it volunteer work, whatever, you know, help them like a project assistant, whatever, just help them set up like film scenes or theater shows or whatever, you know, all just kind of because I was interested in it, you know, so that's kind of how I really got into that. And they were really focused on like the Bollywood, whatever. They were really focused on like Indian style Romeo and Juliet type of movies. So it was actually really, really interesting. Had nothing to do with New Age, had nothing to do with spirituality whatsoever. But that's kind of how I got a glimpse into the Indian culture, and how I actually got to build up a circle of Indian friends. Now, my one Indian friend, she actually, so she lived in India as a teenager. They came to America, but she always felt she had to go back to India. And so as an adult, she went back to, which I know it's very hard, by the way, but she went back to India because India is basically a third world country, I believe. She went back there and she was actually part of keeping her uncle's traditions alive. So I believe he lived in a smaller village, not like Delhi or any of these larger cities. And she was actually part of, I think he was putting up plays or something, just keeping like a part of a culture alive that was native to that center where she was in India. And it kind of like just all kind of dawned upon me, you know, when I got this, like they're targeting India right now, you know, they're really, really targeting India for whatever reason. So first they were targeting China. China's rising up, but we're not sure whether or not it's enough, right? But now actually they're trying to get to India. And so I actually asked her, you know, she's not really into the entire conspiracy theory stuff, whatever, but I actually asked her, what is it like in India right now? Because she's there right now. And she's like, everything's fine. You know, everyone kind of forgot about the disease. Everyone's living their life, whatever. And I'm like, it feels like it's a trap somehow. Because if you go back and you kind of think about, you know, there was a farmers' protest that was happening. They're trying to tear those little cultures and traditions away from India one by one too. But people in the cities aren't noticing that because it's not affecting them yet. So I think the farmers' protest was a good year ago. It's a huge one. There's also this one guy on YouTube called Carl Rock. Whether or not he's infiltrated, I don't really care. But he, for this video, it doesn't matter. But he actually had a lot of videos because he's married to an Indian woman. He had a lot of videos when he lived in India about like the Indian villages and the Indian culture there and everything that happened to him. So very interesting stuff. So it appears they're really targeting India right now for whatever reason. Okay, I mean, we can assume what reason it is. Obviously, they want to tear these spiritual cultures away. If you look at China and you look at India, China used to be a highly spiritual country. Okay, you know, if you just look at like Confucius, whatever, the guy who shared so much wisdom, he was Chinese, right? Yeah, you also have the Japanese wisdom and everything. But the Buddhism thing, the this and that and whatever, these used to be very spiritual countries. And it's the same, I feel, for India, because I do know a lot of Indian people who I would consider very spiritual in a form. It's hard to describe how. It's not like they're into like, you know, any of the woo-woo gaga stuff that you usually find like in the New Age or whatever, but they could just kind of have like the spiritual component to them. where they just randomly share these wisdoms of life, and there's a lesson behind every sentence they say. So if you know what I mean, it is, I mean, you know, but if you don't, I'll try to come up with an example maybe for a video down the line. Anyhow, these used to be highly spiritual countries, highly powerful countries too. To a degree, they still are, of course, but they're trying to drag away the entire tradition and culture from both of these countries in a form or another. Now, the vision that I had on India was of a puppet, and this puppet is kind of like strung. Okay, so I actually saw the Matrix grid again too, and I saw myself as an example as a puppet, and that we're just being puppeteered along until that one moment where I literally had to do this, you know, kind of box through and take my power back. So it's kind of like everyone's being a puppet right now in the Matrix. That's kind of what I got, until you actually start waking up, living your life consciously. And you have to do that with every single step of the way that you're doing. Every single moment that you are actually not sleeping, you need to be conscious of everything. And I know it's so hard, but there are so many things where they're trying to keep us asleep. And it starts with like, making coffee, but you just do it because you're mechanically making, you know, that's being a puppet in the system still, right? Just to like give a short example, but maybe I'll cover more of that in a different video. Again, I know there's so much to talk about. So I got this vision of the puppet, and I asked my friend, hey, so I have this vision about a puppet like being strung by strings somehow. Does that mean anything to you? And she directs me to this one video. She's like, the only area in India where puppets are made or were made would be Rajasthan. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not really sure. So she shows me this video from Rajasthan. It's not Delhi. It's not close to a large city, but I think it's like the province right next to it, if I'm not mistaken. And if I still have any like Indian viewers, you can definitely comment, because I know I had like a few here and there, but I wasn't really super focused on India. Katputli is, you know, so the amazing history of a unique puppet making craft of Rajasthan. And so these are exactly the puppets that I saw. And do you guys remember? I mean, I remember growing up with these string puppets, right? But I always thought, you know, I guess they're made in India. I always had like a Middle Eastern feel to them, but I guess India is still part of the Middle East. So that would kind of make sense. So this is the vision that I had. Puppets being strung along, very powerful here. And I'll share this video in the link below as well. I can't really play it because of, you know, copyright reasons and everything, but you guys can just play it on your own. Katputli is a string puppet, which is a unique puppet making craft of Rajasthan. It's India's most popular form of puppetry. And so they just give a bit more history below that too. Okay, so moving on. Then I found this video here. Japan's national population fell by an alarming 644,000 people in 2021. So not only are they trying to get to China, to India, to every single country out there, but Japan's another one that used to be a very powerful country, by the way. And Japanese people, you know, like, I mean, give an example, Reiki originated from here. I know not everyone's a fan of Reiki, but just to give an example, you know, they had like a lot of like acupuncture, all of that. A lot of these holistic means originate from China, from Japan, and also India, by the way. So they're closing down on population growth here, and they're erasing the older generation in a lot of these different countries. Okay, and I think that was pretty much all. And they hear signs of autism in infants are rising. I wonder why. So yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to share screen-wise, at least. Okay, so I'm just going to read from my notes here. So they're trying to get to the heart of the cities, which we already know, right? Like New York City was highly targeted. All of these cities were very targeted. Cities that have so much culture. And I can tell you one thing. I was walking along the East Village the other day when I went to my town hall meeting where a lot of things were discussed. You know, how are people sheep here? How can we fall for it? Blah, blah, blah. We were walking up these steps to the apartment, and this one guy was saying, can you imagine these women in their hoop dresses trying to go up and down? And I'm like, no, I can't. And you know what? I think those steps were probably made for giants or people who were much larger than they are now, because those steps were from the 1800s. And of course they looked at me because they don't know my channel or anything. And they don't know anything about, you know, the mud flood theory and how our history was erased. but it made a whole lot of sense. So I actually already live in an area in the US, and I live in a city, and I also live close to Philly, which is another one of those areas, by the way. They have the Freedom Bell, the Independence Bell over there, for people who didn't know. DC is another one. So I actually live close to all of these cities right now, where there's already so much history here. All you have to do is just walk down the street and you'll see like cobblestone stuff, or like those steps that were made for giants. So yeah, trying to get to the hearts of the cities, the puppet, the matrix grid, old people equal tradition. Okay, there's a culture with most traditions. So Italy was one of the most, and it still is, one of the most targeted countries during this entire lockdown scenario. They're trying to take our traditions away by isolating the old. They can't convert you into AI without your free will. That's another very important one. And I want to reiterate this over and over again, maybe even make a different video on it, because people are always so freaked out, especially the ones that maybe got their jibbity jabbity Jew. They can't convert you into AI without your free will. You will always have free will. And I think I already mentioned this in a video a year ago. However, what can they do? They can constantly distract you or us in general. You know, life in and of itself is a constant distraction. You know, while I'm recording this, there've already been like 3 different noise complaint level things going on. There's been this, there's been that, whatever. They can constantly distract us to such a degree that, you know, we will kind of, so especially in those circumstances, you can kind of be converted into AI because you don't notice that you have free will, because you're constantly distracted and your power is basically being constantly taken away. But I think this might be a topic for a different video, because it's very, very important to note that. Okay. If there's still a soul left in this city where I am currently in, there will always be a place to go. Now, another interesting thing. So oh yeah, oh my gosh, almost forgot about this. The Hong Kong protests in 2019. So they had a few Hong Kong protests. I don't know when the first one started, if it was like 2017, whatever. But I remember 2019, you know, there was like the really bad protests. They were actually just a prelude for what was going to occur. Shanghai Heart. So they're trying to get to the Shanghai Heart right now. The World Fairs traditions being destroyed. Okay. And then there was something else with Italy. Okay, when you think about Italy, you know, Bella Italia, whatever, what do you think about? I really do miss Italy. If I am able to, I really do want to visit Italy again without any restrictions, by the way. I want to have Italian food, and I want to visit my Italian friends. And I just kind of want to be in that energy again, because Italians, there's nothing like Italy. There's nothing like Italian streets, whatever. Anyone who's been there knows what I mean. There's nothing like Italian foods. There's nothing like Italian people, Italian men, like real Italian men, not American Italian men, by the way. But so what do you think about when you think about Italy, Bella Italia? It kind of carries over into the American Italian culture too, but it's way more extreme in Italy. You think about home life, right? You think about a grandmother, like cooking food, like having these large families, telling stories to each other, you know, kind of keeping traditions alive. Like Italians know how to cook. Italians have 100 types of different pastas. Whereas if you go to a store in Germany or a store here, you have like 5 different kinds, but in Italy, it's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. If you've ever been into a regular store in Italy, you will see like so much pasta where you're just like, isn't it all the same? But then Italians are like, no, it's not all the same. You know, it's just that kind of stuff. So food, cooking, tradition, culture, home life, that is Italy, right? But what was Italy in over the last 2 years? The most cruel lockdown ever. Sure, yeah, Israel, Germany, all of those countries too, but especially Italy, like nowhere it was as bad as in Italy, by the way. And so they are really trying to get to the Italian culture and tradition. What is in Italy? The Vatican is in Italy. What is in the Vatican? Our best friend, the Vatican might have the key out of here, or at least know how to get the heck out of the matrix, right? So there's something with the Vatican, something with the Catholic Church, where they're keeping us down for eons of times already. Now, another very interesting thing, now that we mentioned the Vatican stands for a belief system, and they have what? They have the cross, right? Okay, so what is so interesting is that the Italian friends that I have that are more around my age, not like in their 50s or 60s or whatever, they actually don't believe in the Italian church. I remember back in 2019, this one Italian girl was supposed to marry her Italian boyfriend. And I was like, oh, you're going to have a wedding in an Italian church. And oh my gosh, how lovely and traditional. And she just looks at me and she's like, no, actually, we're not. We don't believe in that. It seemed like her entire generation somehow, she was like from the northern part of Italy. She was like, no, we're not going to have that. And it seemed like they were just going to have like a ceremony somehow, not necessarily the religious way at all anymore. I'm not really sure how people in Sicily would be doing that, but she was from that part and she was like the same generation I am. So that was interesting to me. Who else? So those are a few Italians that don't believe in the cross. Who else does not believe in the cross? Jewish people. I had a Jewish friend who literally told me that the cross has to disappear from this specific room because it's almost offensive to her or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's a bit extreme, but okay, whatever. Like, I don't care. So Jewish people and some Italian people do not believe in the cross. And, if you go back to what is the cross is faith. The cross is also a symbol for Jesus' crucifixion, which makes you wonder whether or not his crucifixion ever happened, or they don't want to remember that moment of him. Okay, so maybe it wasn't as significant as the Bible, as the Catholic Church wants us to make believe, which it all ties into the same thing. Okay, all of this is keeping us deep asleep by worshiping this fake crucifixion event that may or may not have happened, by remembering him as a martyr, which he's not. He doesn't want to be remembered. Jesus does not want to be remembered as a savior. He does not want to be remembered as a martyr. Okay, he wants to be remembered as something else. So the biggest crimes were committed due to the cross. You just go back to the medieval ages and tell me whatever they did there was good. You go back to all the crimes that were crimes committed in the word of faith and God and all of that, right? So, all right, I think we might leave it at that just for this specific video. So the main message here is pockets of home can be found everywhere too. So the main message here is they're trying to get to our traditions. They're trying to tear our history apart again, but in a very cruel way. Like over the past 2 years, the amount of destruction they've done is almost insanity. And they also, so they're getting to a lot of these cultures that used to be very powerful. The cross, some people do not believe in the cross, who should technically be believing in the cross. And stay tuned for more things coming up. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for your support. Keep your head up. And there's a lot of good stuff still happening. Okay, so we have to focus more on the good stuff than the negative stuff. That's the only way how we're going to make it through right now. All right, guys, have a wonderful one. Bye.